Beyond Crazy, Ian Chovil on Work and Money. The story of Ian Chovil is, on a number of levels, a paradox. Here's a guy who thought he was the world's most powerful man. In reality, he was homeless and destitute. Here's a cautionary tale that illustrates just about everything that can go wrong and everything that can go right. Here's a story that travels through the lows of psychosis, addiction, and poverty before ending with recovery. For Ian, the first half of that story is a nightmare. The 48-year-old would not wish on anyone a decade of untreated psychosis. My acne was just disappearing, he says. When I started getting the first symptoms, an insidious, gradual onset of symptoms. I was the most important man in human history because I was going to propagate the human species, he says. My actual situation by then contrasted sharply. I was living in an illegal downtown rooming house with only cockroaches for friends, working at this dumb job changing light bulbs, 5 days a week, 7.5 hours a day. One night in 1987, angry at the aliens, he smashed several windows at his rooming house. The police took him to jail. Prison was actually nicer than almost all the emergency shelters I have stayed at. We care more about our criminals than we do our homeless, he says dryly. A judge sentenced him to 3 years probation with the condition that he see a psychiatrist. Yet, once again, due to the depths of his delusions, Chovil chose not to reveal to physicians the privileged mission he was on. One night in 1990, when other tenants at his rooming house began mainlining heroin in a living room, Ian could ignore his reality no longer. I was blacking out a lot, waking up in strange places and getting these common hallucinations to buy beer with the rent money. I was a couple of months behind in the rent, and I knew I was going to become homeless soon. He accepted a psychiatrist's recommendation that he go to the Homewood Health Center in Guelph for treatment of alcoholism. As sobriety kicked in, many of the delusions which had been exacerbated by the alcohol abuse got kicked out. Chovil started to realize he had no concrete proof of aliens. Other unusual thoughts faded to nothing when he began a regular dose of antipsychotics. Ian did not, at this stage, actually accept that he had schizophrenia, but he was acutely aware of the abject poverty in which he had been living. He says it would take 3 years to really understand that I had schizophrenia and what that meant. Recovering from long-term psychosis is hard enough, yet already Chovil was longing for something more meaningful than just mental stability, longing for a world beyond the confines of his small basement apartment in Guelph. I was very anxious, he says, having nothing to do and no one to do it with. I was really anxious, lonely, miserable, lethargic, and poor. Being stabilized on medication is not an indication of quality of life, really. In more philosophical terms, working gives me more satisfaction in being human. I'm actually fairly happy being a human being these days. Ian remains dedicated to public education, and his website receives hundreds of curious visitors every day. He's been honored with several prestigious awards in a mental health arena, plus a recent Mayor's Award of Excellence in Guelph. Opportunities in a community are something a lot of people with mental illness don't have, he says. If you would ask me 6 or 7 years ago, I would have said there was no point in continuing to live, and things have worked out pretty well. Like a friend of mine says, the plane is supposed to land in Florida, but it winds up in Siberia. You can either be angry or you can accept where you've landed. These days, Siberia is quite pleasant.